So welcome. Thank you for joining us to this conference, which is part of our industry conferences cycle. Today, we have a very interesting conference, and we have with us Shane Murphy, Chief Operating Officer of Ownr, and Derek Hopfner, Chief Revenue Officer of Ownr as well. Um, their Ownr is an RBC Ventures company. However, their story started even before that when they launched a startup in legal tech, which was called Founded Technologies. And Founded Technologies was focused around automating sophisticated legal tasks, such as incorporations, contracts, equity management, etc. So yeah, Founded was recently acquired by RBC Ventures. And without further ado, I'm gonna leave the floor to Derek and Shane to present what they're doing, and yeah, and share their experience. So the floor is to you, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you so much for the
Thanks,
introduction, Mark. And it's really great to be presenting in front of a group at Cyberjustice. Derek and I have long been involved in the world of legal technology, legal automation, and access to justice. And Cyberjustice has been a real advocate in Quebec for that. So it's wonderful to appear before this group and talk a little bit about our experience. Any preliminary comments from you, Derek?
No, I just kind of share your sentiment. Very excited to be here and excited for, first of all, we're going to go through the product a little bit, and then we're going to get into some questions and open up a more lively discussion through the second half of today's presentation.
Yeah, so maybe that's probably the best place to start. Why don't we take the first roughly 25 minutes and we'll show you exactly what Ownr is, and that can help lead to a more informed discussion when we get into, if you want to talk about our background as startup founders leading up to the acquisition by RBC, happy to talk about that, or just to generally talk about legal technology and the automation of legal tasks. So happy to have a discussion later, but let's just show you what exactly Ownr is. So I'll share my screen and we'll walk you through some of the processes that we automate. Okay, so what you should be seeing now is the Ownr dashboard for a company that is that lives on the platform. The platform, it's roughly like it's a social media type approach to looking at your company. In some ways, you have a dashboard which shows you a news feed, recent activities or changes that have happened to your company, and within the company you have a place where you store all of your organizational documents and information. All of this is totally interactive. So what I'll emphasize again and again is that Ownr is not a spreadsheet. It's not just a database or a repository. This is an interactive platform where any data that is changed in the Ownr platform is going to inform documents that are generated based on legal logic or filings with the government as appropriate. So we'll get into some of those functions, but let me just start with a very basic thing that we do and what we do a lot of, hundreds a week, is incorporate new businesses. So at the top left corner, I'll select add a new company. We are currently only available in Canada, and unfortunately we're not available in Quebec. We're only in three provinces at the moment, always looking to expand those. So for purposes of this demonstration, I'll stick with Ontario. You can either incorporate a new business or you can take an existing incorporated business and bring it into Ownr. So again, but for purposes of the demo, I'll stick with incorporating a brand new business. First choice, the entrepreneur, and I didn't really say this clearly. This is built for small business owners, for entrepreneurs. Lawyers use this regularly. We have a lot of lawyers using this, but the language and the feel is meant to be very approachable for business owners to do this themselves. That's why we use plain, simple language, and we try to have a very welcoming experience so people don't feel overwhelmed or intimidated by doing these legal processes themselves. First thing to do is select a name for your company. Of course, you can choose a numbered company, but we find in the small business world, entrepreneurs like to have named companies more than numbered companies. So this again is an interactive name search tool. This is free. Anyone can try this. For example, if I wanted to call my company Oranges Inc. for just example, this punches into a lot of databases of corporate names across the country, and it will say, okay, well, here are some similar names that you might want to consider before you proceed with Oranges Inc. And you can get a list. This taps into provincial name, corporate name databases in every province across the country. So we're pushing people towards choosing unique and distinctive names by identifying similar names, which can cause name registration or trademark issues. I will, just for purposes of this demo, make up a company called Super Terrific Bicycles Incorporated. And we say that name seems to satisfy all requirements, and no one has named a company Super Terrific Bicycles in Canada yet, so I'm probably good to go. Continuing on, it's a step-by-step process. We lay this out in 6 distinct steps for you. First, this is pre-populated. I've just basic account information, what my address is, phone number, etc. And moving on next, corporate information in terms of, do I want a federal company or a provincial company? We can incorporate either. Registered head office address, select the industry that you'll be operating in. Not sure what a bicycle company would be. There you go, transportation, fiscal year end date. So really this is just gathering, if there's any corporate lawyers on the call, often as a corporate lawyer, you have a checklist you're going through with clients. We took the checklist that most corporate lawyers are using for small business incorporation and gathered those data points electronically so we can enter this into government resources and generate documents based on this. One more time, just confirming the name again before I move forward. Here's an example of plain language that we use. If you manage and own this company by yourself, you'll just be pushed towards the end of this process. We can skip a lot of steps knowing that this is a company with one shareholder, one director, one officer. But for fun, we'll say I'm going to have other owners and managers in this company, whoever they might be. There's my board of directors. I'm initially populated because I'm the account holder here, but I can always click to add new people to the board of directors. Next, it's asking about officer positions and officer titles. So by default, we give each company a president and secretary, but again, this is all interactive and customizable for your company. So you could make a chief executive officer, you can make vice presidents. It's just a matter of going to adding an officer and creating the titles and the individuals you want to fill each office within your corporation. Now, the part, I think this is simple for any small business owner, but the part that might get a little bit more complicated and where we go even deeper than a lot of other services is in setting up the capital structure and the shareholders of the company. So let me give you an example here of how deep we can go with share structuring, even for a small business. By default, we just allow voting or non-voting shares. Typical vanilla common shares, very common for small business owners. But if you have tax advice or you want something that's more complex, we created something we call advanced mode, just to make sure people know that this is not always used by a simple small business, but if they have tax advice and want something a little more complex, we can accommodate that. So if they want more than just voting and non-voting shares, add a class of shares. Now we have A, B, C. Click on the gear, and you can see this is very, can get very intricate and customizable here. So you can have common, preferred, special shares. You can really call the share class whatever you want. But we'll say we'll have a preferred share class. We can then have priority rights over the company's assets at dissolution. If you don't know what that means, we have these question marks at each step with a little bit of help text and a link that will link you to a more complex article, a longer blog article about what priority rights would mean at dissolution. You can create series within classes of shares. Again, if you don't know what that is, here's a little one-sentence explanation and a link to get more information on that. So again, if my accountant has said I need a first priority right on a preferred share class with 10 votes per shares and a limited number of shares in that class of 100,000, whatever this is. Corporate lawyers in the call will have received these memos from accountants about the share properties they need. We can accommodate pretty much what any accountant will be requesting, except for sort of unusual cases. But for the most part, we've built this to accommodate tax advice without giving tax advice, which I think is an important distinction. Of course, this is meant to be execution, we're not the providers of any legal or tax advice. Of course, we are a technology company. So if that meets the requirements of the small business owner, great, then we'll proceed with this share class structure. Then within our shareholders, we can then decide, okay, well, what issuances will be. So I can add another individual to the company. I could add another corporation to the company. For simplification for this demo, I will just remain the only shareholder, but I'll issue myself. I just created a Class C preferred voting. So I'll say I want one of these preferred shares and 1,000 common voting shares. Then I've got 1,001 shares to be issued following incorporation. I could add even vesting provisions to that so that there would be a vesting arrangement where shares could be clawed back if I leave the company. That's very common in tech oriented companies. Startups often like these vesting provisions attached to share issuances. So we can always add those. And of course, a price per share. We'll make these shares each worth $1. Whatever you want to do there, we can accommodate it. Clicking next. Now, of course, you have to pay, such is life. I'll just skip through this quickly. Our pricing structure is a little bit, as you'd say, intricate. We are an ongoing subscription service, which is something we really have to emphasize to our users, that you come to Ownr not just to get incorporated, but for your company to stay on the platform long term. This is just a demonstration credit card, by the way. Not putting my real credit card information in there. So now that I've paid, it just will process for a second, and then I'll get the opportunity to do a final review, and then we'll see the articles of incorporation that have been generated and are ready to be filed with the government. So again, we just want to make sure that anyone who goes through is entering correct information. So that's why before you file, you need to confirm everything you've entered, including everything from your address to your industry, your directors. This is just a repetition of the data that we'd entered a minute ago. My ABC share class structure, my shareholders, 2 issuances under my name, $1 per share. Everything looks good, great. Then the final step is the articles of incorporation have been generated. So here, this is a federal Canadian company. These are the articles which reflect everything we've just entered in. And again, you can see my ABC share class structure is recorded here with my specific maximum number of shares. This is including all of the rights and provisions of the share classes, including the complex preferred class that has been entered in there. Finally, restrictions. I know I'm scrolling through fast, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this type of boilerplate contract language. And finally, it ends with the initial board of directors. Great. So after going through that process, I confirm that I'm authorized to do this and I agree to the terms of use, of course, and I can enter my own squiggly signature. Now, sort of the magic here is that this has been prepared, and obviously we're not going to ask you to download and print your articles and mail them to the federal government. Ownr connects into government resources wherever we operate. So once I click submit, this is not just going to Derek's desk so he can go file it with the government. This has been electronically submitted to Corporations Canada immediately. And once that has been successfully processed by the federal government, they return the articles to Ownr, and Ownr will advise the user that the articles have been prepared, they can be reviewed through Ownr, and then any of the corporate organizational documents, the constituting documents for the corporation's minute book, are also prepared by Ownr. So the corporate bylaws, the share registers, all of the standard corporate documents that you would see for a new corporation, we will prepare those automatically once this is finalized by the government. So I'll be able to show you that in a minute, but the automation is currently running even in the testing environment before we can show the actual those bylaws and other constituting documents. So that is really the process I wanted to show off for by far our most commonly used feature. Like when we started our own business, Founded Technologies, we were doing a couple of these a week at the start. We managed to scale that up until we were doing hundreds, and now we're doing thousands, and frankly tens of thousands. We've secured a lot of the market in Ontario, Alberta, and BC for small business incorporation. This is effectively how small business owners are currently incorporating in Canada. They're not really going to their lawyer as much anymore. This is becoming the standard, and we're proud of that because we viewed this from the start as a better solution for small business owners. Derek, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think in the interim, what we could do is just show right now, like fast forward into a company that is fully set up here. And we can kind of take a look at what does it look like once your company is fully incorporated, and what can you do on the platform? And you can see here, what Shane's showing here is the share issuances and the cap table. But again, as Shane mentioned at the beginning, this is not a static database. What you can do is make changes to your company, and then in fact, we'll prepare the documentation, file it with the government as necessary, and then you have a new version of your company at each stage. So one thing we could do for this company, for example, is add myself to the board of directors.
Sure.
So if we go to the directors right now in this company, which looks like it was incorporated maybe 20 days ago, it's just Shane as the director. But let's say I've now, oh, you need to pay something, Shane.
One moment, let me upgrade my demo account here.
Sounds good. Great. So now what we can do is, let's say we want to add me to this company as a director. So it's as easy as just inputting my details. And then once we go ahead and add, yeah. So you can see here, we'll go ahead and add myself as a director, and then automatically our system knows the jurisdiction of the corporation, the processes that are required to complete that addition of a director, and then it will actually prepare the forms and file them. So you can see here instantly, our system has prepared the government form to add me as a director, and it'll go even further than that and prepare any corporate resolutions that are required to authorize this. So in this instance, Shane is the sole shareholder and director here. He'll go ahead and submit this. And then if we go to I don't know if it'll automatically show up, Shane, in terms of the corporate resolution.
The corporate resolution should be, there it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
1 second.
So
yeah, as the existing sole shareholder of the company, I will need to approve the addition of a director to the board. Again, this is taking the Canada Business Corporation and, in a lot of ways, just codifying it in logic, so we know. I can't cite the section number, but somewhere in the CBCA it says shareholders will approve director changes and subject to any shareholder agreement. So now the resolution has come to the shareholder asking to approve that appointment of a director. And so the form I signed previously is actually being held in escrow by the technology, saying, oh no, we're not going to file that with the government until we have shareholder approval to do so. So now I'm signing in my capacity as a shareholder to say, yes, we approve the addition of Derek to the board. Once the resolution is signed and shareholder approval has been provided, then the form I previously signed is released from escrow and it is now with Corporations Canada, and the change is effective, subject to Derek signing off on his consent to the appointment to the board, which is a document that he will receive as now he's been entered into the system.
Yeah, so there's a tremendous amount of items that you can do on the Ownr platform. Everything from, adding a new director and officer, changing your address, adding new shareholders. You can even create employee stock option plans. It is really robust in what can be completed. For, I think, the purposes of today, I think hopefully everyone has a flavor of what you can do. But really the idea is create a really simple way to start your company that has the flexibility that's required once you've received legal or tax advice to structure your company a certain way, and then a really wonderful way to have a home base for your company as it lives on and grows. So if you're a one-person company and then you turn to a 5-person company and 10, 15, you can have your company live on the Ownr platform, and we can grow with you. So.
Yeah, I think that's it. That gives you a good sense of the flows are all very similar to what we saw with that director change. So even if I'm issuing new shares to a new shareholder, it's the same idea of, well, who in the corporation needs to approve this change? They're provided with the corporate resolutions to approve that change. And then any contracts, government filings are prepared, signed off by the authorized individual, and either filed back in the company's Ownr account, which is its corporate minute book, or it goes to the government where the change requires notification of the government. And this can change province by province. This is why we can't just wake up one day and be available in Quebec. We can't just be available in California, because we need to look at the laws around corporate compliance in each jurisdiction and program our software to be in compliance and generate documents which work in that jurisdiction too.
Yeah, and then also ensure that that jurisdiction allows for electronic filing. We've also made decisions in the past where, there's some jurisdictions in Canada where they still don't allow for electronic submission, which is difficult. In terms of what we do differently, what we really set out to do is make legal subscription as a service a thing. And that's the way that allows the business itself to have strong enough revenue potential to justify acquisition costs and things like that. I think we're at the 30-minute mark, so I feel like we're hitting pretty good on timing.
Yeah, unless there's specific features that are relevant to the audience, I think that's probably enough from a demo, but I'm happy to get into some questions with you, Mark.
Thank you very much. That was absolutely impressive. I was personally impressed. Thank you. It's very interesting. And I have lots of questions, but I would invite our audience to ask questions as they wish as well in the Q&A or Q&R section. So I had, well, I would start with where you started. You said your solution is aimed at small businesses, and it's totally understandable. You also mentioned, however, that lawyers are using it. How is that happening? What is your relationship with lawyers, and how do they use it?
Yeah, there are two different ways that lawyers have discovered us and incorporated us into their practice. The first way is with large firms, with national firms. We work with both Blake's and McCarthy's. What we've done for them is we've created a branded version of Ownr specific for them. So we took everything you saw, but we put it under the McCarthy's brand, for example, and then lawyers within specific practice groups at McCarthy's can use this type of flow as a way of servicing their clients using technology and giving them a new, different experience. The challenges of working there is that they are, of course, very specific about their intellectual property and their knowledge bank. So all of the documents that, like even the resolutions that you saw, we had to code for example, the McCarthy's version or the Blake's version, which can be not hugely different, but still specific enough to make them happy. So we could talk a lot about that process and like standardizing documents for lawyers and firms, which was a challenge. But now they've really decided to use Ownr with their startup practice. So where the section of the firm that's working with high growth technology oriented companies is really using this type of experience. It lowers the costs for the lawyers. It keeps them within their ecosystem, and it provides a nice tech-driven experience for them. The other way we work with lawyers is do exactly how you saw it. There's nothing stopping a lawyer from using this type of approach to incorporate their clients or to do routine corporate maintenance. This is as efficient as having this done by a manual process by your staff. We speed up these processes. We make filings faster. So a lot of firms, the smaller firms, sole practitioners, view this as a really key part of their technology and the way they serve their clients.
Yeah, just on that, like we do have some power users, I think, on the lawyer side. Like I think one lawyer, I think, has done 50 corporations through Founded to date. And again, it's an interesting way to think about it because like there's a small additional cost to use Founded, but you have removed any additional support costs as a result. So the only time you incur a cost, which is minimal, is the time when you're actually getting revenue for your client. So you probably have reduced the size of your team by a certain amount or allow team members to do higher value work. And you can just focus on getting the corporation done and then getting onto other items. So yeah, we certainly have, I'd say, dozens of small firm lawyers that use it as well.
Yeah, it makes me think of, we often hear these scary stories about technology replacing lawyers, and looks like you have a step in that direction. Not to scare our lawyers in our audience, but that's how I understood it. But practically speaking, if a lawyer is working for can a lawyer incorporate a company for his client on the platform? And
Yep.
if he has like adjustments or changes he wants to do on the documentation, is that something that's possible? Because we saw the standardized models, but is there a way to make changes?
Yeah, happy to chat about that. That's one of the decisions that we actually made early on is we don't allow custom provisions to be added throughout the process. So we do work with our law firm clients to get feedback. So if there's something that we can't do, we want to provide the ability for them to do the edit within the flow. But we don't allow for kind of freestyle changes to any of the documents. And the reason for that is it's twofold. One, we needed guardrails within the platform so that people can't do things they ought not to do. Now, if a lawyer's in control the whole time, then there's no issue. But if 85% of the users of the platform are individuals, we can't let them do a bunch of stuff. So we've added guardrails to each corporation And that's the only thing that can be done. The second thing, which is actually the reason we built it this way, is so we can understand all of the data throughout the life cycle of the corporation. If we control all of the elements that can be editable, that means we can fully understand the data as it incorporates, as you create a shareholders agreement, as you issue more shares, and there's never an issue with a user doing something where we don't actually understand what the company cap table is or share structure is or things like that.
Mm-hmm. I see, and I'm gonna take I still have lots of questions, like I said, but I'm gonna take the questions from the audience at the same time.
For sure.
So we have a question from Anne Chinyaev here, who is at the lab, working at the lab with us. She's asking, how long did it take you to build this platform?
A while.
Is it built?
Is it done?
The funny thing is, yeah, it's never done. It's so preliminary work on it started in what, 2017?
2016.
2016, yeah, that's true. So it's all a matter of when was it ready to unroll which features. We're always improving and adding things, but from going from the idea around 2016 to launch was just about a year.
1 year, and that was with 3 developers just to launch. And then we've been iterating and growing it since then. So what you're seeing now is the product of 4 years of, or 5 years, I guess, of work. And it just gets more and more complex, and you deal with different issues as you grow. Like as Shane mentioned, there are a lot of people using Ownr right now. Like I would say on average, we help start about 100 companies a day. Now, not all of those are corporations. They are business registrations and sole proprietorships, but like there are thousands of companies that are created a month. There are hundreds of thousands of users on the platform now. So you're dealing with scale issues, or not issues, but being able to handle a lot of users at one time, which is exciting. Yeah, it
is. And but just to understand well, so I understood you started working when you founded technologies. How did the integration with Ownr help you or affect you, or did it accelerate things? How did that go?
Yeah. Well,
is it the same thing? I mean, is it the same technology, or it added something? Or
yeah. So we were an independent company for 4 years, and we were acquired by RBC Ventures in the fall of 2020. So we actually just integrated the products about 1 month ago exactly. So what you are seeing now is the fully integrated product. The integrated product is essentially all of founded technology with a little bit of Ownr capabilities built in and the Ownr scale, and that is the new product. So what you're seeing now is still all of the founded technologies that have been built over the last 4 years still exist within the product.
Okay, yeah, I see. I'm going to jump to David Johnston questions here. He's asking 3 questions. I don't know if you see them or even more after that, but we'll start with the beginning. So if there's a faulty provision somewhere, and he's asking who would be liable. I understood. The second question is either law firms were reviewing your documents, and I understood of your answers that yes, you had feedback from law firms. But yeah, it's a very, very good question. So if there's any fault, who is liable, and has any provincial bar interpreted that you're practicing law?
Yeah, we get this question all the time when speaking to legal groups, and yeah, I think it speaks to what we are and what we're not. We are a technology company. We're not providing legal advice. None of this is one-off, although there are ways of structuring this, as we saw for yourself. We're not telling you what to do or how to structure it. At the end of the day, it's up to you to, if you need advice on it, to take what you want to do on Ownr and get it reviewed by someone else. But the platform has been vetted exhaustively. You don't get acquired by RBC without going through an incredible amount of due diligence. Multiple law firms have gone through line by line everything we've done, and we've got as far as we did because we are as careful as possible about creating these things. So so that's it. And then with the bar societies, across the country, we've never operated in the shadows or in the dark. We've always been incredibly transparent about what we do when it comes to regulators. Like, I don't know if we even mentioned it, but Derek and I are both former practicing lawyers, so this is something we take very seriously. I sit on the technology committee of the Law Society of Ontario, so that we are directly involved in these discussions about what role will technology play in the delivery of legal services. Of course, I'm constantly an advocate for a central role for technology, including self-service technology. So I think the short answer is of course we cover our own risks through terms of use, and making sure that our users are clear on the risks of proceeding by themselves and without proceeding with a lawyer, but also it's a matter of taking as much care as possible. And finally, just going to the reality of it, I think when you look at what lawyers are doing for these routine types of documents that we really are the core of our business, these aren't being generated differently each time. We all know that the truth as corporate lawyers is a lot of the same thing being used, copy and pasted. So I think we really do replicate what most lawyers would do. We have our standards, we apply them to the situation, and it works. We can't say it works flawlessly, but it works just as well as the other alternatives while driving down the cost.
I think the other thing to highlight around this discussion is like our view of this is part access to justice, but also part expanding the legal market. When we look at the number of entrepreneurs we assist in a year, let's just say it's 30,000. It's not like those 30,000 were going to a law firm. I would hazard a guess 99% of them were not going anywhere before. So either we provided them a tool to get a really easy way to start their business, and now they are a candidate for a law firm because things are set up, they have a business running, they've been, they got the little push they needed to get things going. And secondly, everyone's corporation now is in a much better state. So if they were going to go do it on their own before, we just see so many nightmares where there's costs involved in fixing things. So at the end of the day, we think we're like increasing the number of entrepreneurs in Canada because we're making it easier, which then creates stronger businesses, which then creates more legal work for lawyers throughout Canada and hopefully North America, et cetera. So we do think there's like a net benefit to the legal profession for what we're doing.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And inevitably, we want to ask a few questions about Quebec. I know you guys don't cover Quebec for now. Well, actually, we have a question from David Johnson who's asking, can I guess that enabling your platform in Quebec is not likely in the short term in view of the French language? Have you considered that? Yeah,
it's language is, of course, a concern. We wouldn't launch in Quebec without providing a French language version, but it's also, it's more than just language. You couldn't just translate what we have and say we're ready for Quebec. It is the integration with government resources. So to make sure that our, everything we do is compliant. Derek mentioned, signatures. Is everything we file with the government of Quebec, would it be compliant using our e-signature tool? These are things that we've looked into, we've researched. So it's, but yeah, it's more than just a language issue. It is an integration issue to make sure we work with government resources.
Yeah, and that's actually, I can imagine that should have been tremendous work because there's a lot of things to consider. But just to understand, well, even for like a federal corporation, you won't let it be created in other provinces than those that you cover already?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason for that is that regardless, if it's a federal corporation, if you change your board of directors, there's, I don't know the specific example, but there's often provincial forms that would need to still be updated. So we would need an integration with the government, even for a federal corporation.
Quebec is something that's kind of on our roadmap, and I don't know what the date is, but it's important for us to kind of get there. So it's something that we're advocating internally, and I think we're excited to do it. The other thing too is just is resourcing too. We want to make sure that we do a really good job. So make sure we have the staff on the customer success side to be able to help all the entrepreneurs within Quebec and things like that as well. So hopefully we'll get that this year, but
yeah,
we'll see.
It will happen. It will absolutely happen, where we'll find a way to make this work in Quebec. It's you can't give a timeline right now.
Yeah.
Well, I actually noticed when you did the name search, you had results from Quebec. Are
It's
you
true. Yep.
somehow integrated with the Quebec registry? Because it's kind of a closed one, I know.
Yeah, we find ways of getting the data that we need. That's an example of like we can find pieces, but we can't get everything, and we won't do it until we have everything. But there's definitely the groundwork for getting into Quebec is being worked on. It's good you noticed that.
Yeah, I found it very interesting actually. David Johnson in the audience is asking if you will be demonstrating a shareholder agreement. Is it something you do? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Sure. Yeah, it's something we do, but I don't think we'll do it today. There's probably fewer things that are boring to watch. A shareholder agreement being created on Ownr. So if happy to show David afterwards, or you can book a session with someone from our team, but it's actually quite complicated and not terribly exciting. So we don't need to go through it today.
Okay, but it is something you do though.
Yeah.
It is something we do, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and just going back when you said you integrate, when we talked about the integration with the Quebec name search and everything, how did you work with the government when you show that it's integrated with their system and it's sent automatically? Did you, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, it just depends on the jurisdiction, really. So like a really good example where we've got a closer relationship is BC. So BC assists with the work to integrate to their system, but we also have a relationship with them after, because they're doing a lot of work now in terms of open APIs with the government. So we have kind of discussions with kind of team members on that side to give us updates as to when updates are coming and things like that. So that would be one example. And another example would be, Ontario, where it's closed off actually, and you can't get access to the government without connecting with a third party. So our relationship then is with a third party provider in order to automate.
Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't know there were third parties like helping with.
It's not that common. It seems to be something that's in Ontario. We're pushing for more open across Canada. I think it would be a wonderful thing. So.
Yeah, and I find it interesting. Do you focus exclusively on Canada, or at least for now? Have you ever thought of going maybe in the US or developing internationally?
Yeah, those discussions they've changed since we joined RBC. Now that we're part of a large national institution, I think our focus is national at the moment, which is probably one more reason why Quebec is so central to our plans. But previously, when we were just a 20-person startup company, we were inevitably looking more at the larger markets in the US as our next step. But now it's I think for the short term, it's safe to say we're focused on going nationwide in Canada, but I can't say we're going to limit ourselves to that. We'll see where we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, of course not. David Johnson is asking if you have other types of form agreements that other than boring shareholder agreements.
Yeah, we do have a. Yeah, our website has kind of details on all of them, but we do everything from like website terms of use to being able to make corporate changes to some investor documents to kind of across the, like employment agreements and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do within the Ownr platform for sure.
Yeah, and maybe before closing off, I wanted to ask you about, the subject that kind of can be avoided in all these discussions is, um, have you been affected, or what was the effect of the pandemic on your activities? Did you see any change? How did it affect you?
Yeah, we actually just did a survey.
I think it's a typical story of the economy. At first it was terrible, and then it was good.
Yeah.
There was a scary time a little over a year ago now, where we had to reassess what it meant to be a small business at that time, with so much uncertainty. Government support helped us. We didn't have to let any of our employees go. Um, but yeah, I feel like I'm cutting off your part of the story, Derek. But the short version
Yeah.
is suddenly it turned a corner. 6 weeks into the pandemic, people were at home. People were looking for new jobs and new opportunities, and we were the perfect solution at that time for an online service. So our business exploded during the pandemic. We had our best months ever, and we put ourselves clearly in a very favorable position for an acquisition, because we proved we had suddenly so much value uh, through our technology. So it all
Yeah.
worked out well.
We did some, we did a survey a while back and looked at some data, and this is combining Ownr and founded data, but from 2019 to 2020, we saw a 70% increase.
Wow.
Yeah. So to give you a sense of scale there. So, but we can look at each month, like Shane said, like March and middle up to middle of April was scary, where people weren't doing anything, and then all of a sudden, it got very busy. So.
And if I understand well, you explained this, at least in part, by people trying to start their small businesses while they have time and they're at home, right?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two pieces to it. The first is that one. So people were in one of two camps. Either they were at home and they still had a job, but they were bored, so they had more time to pursue their hobby and make it into a business.
Mm-hmm.
Or the second is they were laid off and they wanted to take control of their future, and they started a business for employment purposes. And then the other thing with this is the previous means of incorporating, which was face-to-face, was no longer available. So people had to go online to get it done. And then so it's kind of like a perfect storm in that instance for us.
Yeah, and we see that a lot with actually different legal tasks and the legal practice and lawyers and courts, everyone going, at home, working from home, and trying to give services electronically, or not in person. Um, Maybe that would be perhaps my last question. How do you see the whole legal tech field, legal technology developing in views of the pandemic and afterwards? Since I I love to ask these questions to you guys, because you are like in the heart of it in the private sector, developing from a startup, a legal startup. So how do you see the future for that?
Yeah, I always break it down into the legal technology for lawyers, and then legal technology going towards the public generally, like direct to consumer. And there was a sort of big wave of legal technology starting 5 years ago, but most of it spent its time focused on lawyers. And we know, there are a few success stories, but I don't think people saw the massive adaptation of disruptive technology within law firms. Law firms have adopted things that communication tools. Slack in law firms is now being used, e-signatures, those things. But I don't think that the legal technology for lawyers lived up to its disruptive hype. So where I really think the transformative technologies will be appearing now and really gathering steam is more on what we're doing on the direct to the public side, whether it's business law, immigration law or anything else. I think we're going to see the quality of those companies and the outputs really improving. But again, I'm just guessing. What do you think, Derek?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're going to see also existing technology providers in other industries start to go after more of the legal industry in terms of the law practitioners. I think like a company like Salesforce is probably well positioned to, offer, an update to their product that would be useful to them. Like Salesforce is a good example where millions of people use it. It has the usage required to be a contract management platform, but it probably doesn't have all the facilities there to be a fulsome contract management platform. So what could they build or acquire so that they can turn that into a revenue stream, or something like Dropbox or things like that? I think we're going to start seeing a little bit more of those popping up. I think the other thing too is I think there's a lot of interesting things that can happen in products for lawyers, but I think the revenue ends up being very difficult, truthfully. And if you're a small business or you're a startup, or even if you're like 50 employees, if your customers aren't the first movers when it comes to technology, it gets difficult to find your first 50 law firms to use, because traditionally, and this exists in law firms and accounting firms and all professional services, they just aren't first adopters when it comes to technology generally. And I think it ends up being difficult on the revenue side of things if you want to grow a business in it. And that's why when it comes to those segments, I think you might see it a little bit more from Microsoft or something like that, where they're comfortable with the relationship they have with the provider, and then they can get some of those tools in it. But it's still early days, I think. And yeah, I feel like we've seen kind of the ebb and flow of technology. I know like 4 years ago, everyone was saying how we all needed to use blockchain for everything, and that died down, and it seems to be picking back up again. And then I think as long as you build something that solves a problem, it'll find a use case. So
yeah, that's very interesting. The same example as you're giving for blockchain could be used for, artificial intelligence, for example. It's like up and down, and but you're right, and we see more and more of these big companies, big players stepping up in the legal industry, legal field. And maybe even you could be an example when we talk about RBC in the legal field. I mean,
it's a good example.
Yeah, it's an example. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point, is that when we started a company, of course, as a startup, you think about being acquired at some point. It's a possibility, but we would never have said, oh, a bank is going to acquire us. We would never have understood the business case when we started. But as we grew and understood, our users and their initial value and their long-term value, a bank makes a lot of sense. But yeah, you would never think a bank would move into the legal industry, but they're after something different than just the legal processes. That's not where they see the value. They see the value in bringing in thousands of small business owners to one of their products.
And I think that again touches on a point where something like Salesforce or Microsoft, like if you're just providing the legal technology, your lifetime value of revenue per customer is a certain amount. But if you have all these other ancillary services, like a bank or things like that, then all of a sudden you have all this other opportunity to get revenue, and you can spend more money to acquire customers. So it's, I think it ends up being a little bit difficult for smaller players as well as a result.
Thank you very much, Derek and Shane. It was very interesting, and we'll follow up with you on this conference, and have a good day.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.